Hello, and welcome to the Starting Line podcast with me, Rich Leigh. For the final time this series, thank you so much. Honestly, I can't begin to tell you how proud I am of what we put together, and it's all because of the guests, the people around me, and you. So thank you. If you haven't already subscribed or followed, please go and press that button right now. Go and do it wherever you listen to this podcast, because when Series 2 comes out, it will download automatically for you. So if you've enjoyed this, if you think you'd like to hear more of what comes next, and I promise you, you will, some of the guests we've got lined up, it's just bigger and better. It's incredible. Go, subscribe, follow, and it will automatically download. To which point, if you have enjoyed even one episode this year, or this series, please go and leave us a review if you haven't already. Just click that star button. 5 stars are lovely. Thank you very much. Feel free to write something. It will get read. And, well, now's the time to do it. So thank you. Thank you to the guests. Thank you to everybody that's helped and really supported putting this together. I'm not going to be back at the end of this because the episode doesn't say what I need it to do and say. And I am signing off until next time. So for the final time, this series, without further ado, I bring to you our conversation about the second half of this series Conversations with Ashley Stokes. Today we're going to be going back through the second half of guests that we had in Series 1. There are some incredible people throughout, and I am back here with one Mr. Ashley Stokes. How are you finding your newfound fame?
I've received some very lovely comments from people. I've not listened to the episodes myself.
But it's on the list, right? You're gonna be listening to the episodes.
So I'm going to listen to them with the volume turned down so that you get the listen. But I have to listen to my own voice all day, so I can't be doing that then in my...
Oh, man, we've had genuinely some lovely messages, both from people that we know, but also, I mean, I woke up this morning to a message from a guy in Italy saying how much he loved the podcast. I mean, I think in particular the Hayley Parsons one he was talking about, but, you know, just the podcast in general. And then I went and I looked at the breadth of listeners, you know, geographically where they're from. We're talking 39 countries. Obviously, the majority are UK, second is US, as you might possibly imagine. But then, you know, we're getting Philippines, Australia, Greece, Maldives, Slovakia.
But that's awesome, though.
So Mauritius. So, you know, we're talking tons and tons of people from all over the world listening to this idiot, for one.
Mr. Worldwide.
Oh, God. It's been a wonderful first series. I know you've got some questions for us to get through, but what we're going to do is go through each of the second half guests, go through some behind the scenes stuff, talk about each of them in turn. I think what resonated seemingly with some people in the last episode where we did the review was some of the stuff that maybe we didn't keep in the edit, or some of the stuff that came after the fact, like Levi Roots being arrested by the hunted guy. The stuff that you don't necessarily know in the moment. People just appreciate that openness. And for most of us, I guess we're not creating podcasts, right? We're not creating content. We're not going out and doing this. And there's a tiny bit of, even for me, it was right at the beginning. I was like, I don't know how to do that. So hopefully I brought people along in this first series and showed them that, you know, it's definitely doable. There is a real commitment to it. There's a real, as I say, tact or art to being rejected and keeping going. But no, man, I'm glad to have you back in. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for having me.
Should we get into the guests?
Let's do it.
So we left off having just spoken about Christian, saying that his fight was coming up. By the time this comes out, we will know the result. I have everything crossed for getting back on track, win. And I've seen the opponent. I know what Christian can do. I think he does it. I think he wins. I think, you know, I mean, more than think, 99% sure that he wins. UFC it's a freak sport. Anything can happen. You can catch a stray elbow and get cut and have the fight stopped. So I'm not much of a betting man, but if I was, then, you know, putting it all on him. So exciting. He was the last person we spoke about, the last guest that we chatted about, which then brings us on to episode 8, which was Calderwood MBE. On this series alone, we've had OBE, so that's Cracknell and Hayley Parsons, OBE, Calderwood MBE, and then later on Charlie Mullins OBE, who we're going to be talking about. So 3 OBEs, 1 MBE, world champions, Olympic gold medal
Medalists.
winners, world record holders, multiple world record holders. It's just some incredibly high achieving human beings. And Calder is very, very much in that mix. I went to Shropshire to interview Calder, did a ton of research, made sure I knew everything about, what she'd achieved and, when the injury was and all those things. So for anybody that hasn't listened, Calder's story is a fantastic one, incredibly gifted, athletically, represented nationally.
Riding,
yeah, go for it.
Rowing, climbing mountains, and then a different kind of rowing.
Yeah, paracanoeing.
Paracanoeing,
She was a Team GB paracanoeist. She rowed the Atlantic as the first adaptive person to row the Atlantic solo. Just incredible. So I knew her CV. I knew her kind of Wikipedia. But what I wasn't prepared for was just the loveliest, most hospitable.
That comes across.
Do you think?
In bucketfuls.
Yeah,
honestly.
she was just like, when I think about resilience and I think about optimism and, you try and put the two things together. And she did speak to the fact that she struggled. She said, I was in a way, does become that kind of, why me? How can this happen to me? And then she was able to move past that to a point of appreciation and gratitude and what can I do then? And all she's done since is inspire and do incredible things for victims of the Manchester Arena bombing and, countless other people since with her charity.
What was interesting to see, actually, just to sort of expand on that point. So she was lovely throughout, right? As soon as she starts talking about the people that she supports to the charity, and I think that's when she was talking about the bomb victims, suddenly a kind of stoniness came across her because she was saying, we're not going to do this for you. You do it for yourself.
Yeah.
Like it became, you could feel the tone shift. And clearly that's what's needed, for those people to help them move forward. We're going to give you the tools, but you've got to learn how to use them. And that was quite interesting. I definitely noticed that. Yeah. Which is obviously how she talks to those people when she's in, when she's in those groups. And so they might see a very different side to her if they listen to this.
It's not lacking in empathy and kindness too, but maybe that's what she realised helped her. Is that directness?
Well, you find it with I always find it with paramedics.
Right.
When if an ambulance is called, normally the bystanders, is everything okay? Is everything okay? And then the paramedics will come in and they are short, sharp, and abrupt. Yeah. Because it cuts through. Yeah. And they want an answer, and they don't take the vague responses. They want a clear-cut answer. Yeah. And so clearly something in the sphere of care means that's an effective tool.
I hadn't thought of it in that way. I did notice a slight tone shift, but for me it was a long interview. We went for quite a long time.
Well, I think it edited down to like 2.5 hours.
Yeah, that's edited down. Yeah, and Calder's a funny one in that there's very, very little behind the scenes because so much was said in the interview.
Yeah.
And the things that might have come out were probably just repetition on her or my part.
When I first listened to this one and we had a conversation afterwards, I think the comment I said to you was, I think we were an hour and a half in, if not more, and we hadn't got to the Atlantic row yet. Yeah. Like, it's just her story is just crazy, and I don't think what was interesting, I think, and this is where, for me, I certainly noticed your interviewing style drew out a lot more information. I don't think she was planning on speaking about a lot of the things that she spoke about. And then you kind of, pushed her down the route of, no, tell me more about this. Let's not rush to the end. Yeah. Because I think she was expecting to get right to, you want to talk to me about that?
Everybody does. Everybody seems to think that it's just that traditional media interview style. And I mean, I've listened to her on other podcasts. I've seen her in interviews, and it's almost a rush to get to that main thing.
But there was so much interesting stuff. God. So that we got the accident, and then you've got the row and the charity stuff.
Not just one accident, remember? She got hit off her horse by a lorry.
Yeah. Hay bale and cancer.
Yeah. This is a woman, she's a Terminator. I mean, she is actually one of two guests. We talked about Levi's last week. One of two guests who's had or having a film written or screenplay written about their lives. Incredibly hospitable and just a lovely, lovely woman. One of those people whose company you leave and you think, I'm really glad that I met that person. It's not to do her a disservice, but not a quote unquote name, like Sean Conway might be in his space. But
yeah, I certainly hadn't heard of Calder before the podcast. Obviously, her focus is, she's involved in the charities and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't think her personal brand is necessarily something she's too interested in.
That's exactly it.
What I suppose people like that need is they need somebody who runs a PR agency of some sort to sort of explain the benefits of that, because I think some people probably don't realize that actually boost your personal brand and then there's a halo effect on everything you do. Yeah, I think the reason that you are who you are is because you lift others up.
I appreciate that, man. Well, let's lift somebody else up that definitely should be in the public eye, and that is Mike McCarthy, who co-founded the Baton of Hope, the UK's largest suicide prevention campaign. He was given the Points of Light Award by Rishi Sunak, and it was an incredible campaign. We should say that 16 people a day take their own lives. We're talking, I think it's a fifth of people consider taking their own lives. Mike McCarthy's hope, and with his co-founder Steve Phillip, who also, both of them had lost their sons. So Mike had lost his son Ross, and Steve had lost his son Jordan to suicide. Both of them have a dream of a zero suicide society. Now that's something we could potentially even talk about, because I have thoughts about that, but and I think you do too. But let's just for a start applaud the man. This is the first episode. I was driving there, and it's he was, where was he? Sheffield. It was far.
It's a long old way.
It's a long old way. Again, I travel all over the country doing this, but it's a long old way. And I pulled up, and I was like, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it. It felt possibly too big.
Yeah. Obviously, I asked you in the last episode, one of the questions was like, how do you deal with the emotion?
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously this one, we've heard emotion from others because obviously we've had some crazy stories.
Yeah.
Obviously Calder should be there's others who've had traumatic experiences.
Yeah.
It's
on another level.
It's a different type of emotion.
Yeah.
Because those things happen to them, and they've learned to come to terms with it in their own way and succeed in spite of it.
Yeah.
For what Mike's gone through, it's something that happened to a loved one, and everyone responds to that differently.
Yeah. And I mean, I said to him in the room, and I've said to others since, grief doesn't have a timeline. It doesn't give a fuck who you are. It does not discriminate, and it will keep coming for you. It could be 20 years down the line, you just get that pang. It'll be 40 or 50 years down the line, you'll get that pang. But I was sat outside of his house, and his car wasn't there in the drive at the time that we were supposed to be meeting him. And I was like, I'm sure I've got the right address. So I double-checked the address. And there was a bit of me, a genuine tiny bit of me that thought, it's all right if we don't do this. It's okay if we don't do this. Because it wasn't fight or flight, but it was a tiny bit. Can I do this justice? Because I do bring, I guess, some lived experience. I just did the quotation marks, some lived experience in and around this space. And I am known by people that do know me for speaking about mental health in regards to resilience a tiny bit more than I am. Let's put my arm around somebody and, let's let you talk, because I think that talking is massively valuable. Again, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't. I think conversation changes everything. I really do. I think it changes minds much more than, I guess, we said this in the last one, conflict or trying to kick somebody into changing their mind. But I think as a society, we've veered off in a different direction. I think we've gone in a direction that isn't good for us as a whole. And I spoke to it recently. If anybody wants to hear more about my bloody nonsense thoughts on that, I spoke on Reach Out for Mental Health, a podcast.
Let's just call it the language that you use there. So we're talking about mental health, which is an open conversation. Yeah. And your instinct is to go, my nonsense talk. It's something deep and meaningful that shaped you as a person.
Yeah.
And it's easy to dismiss it as nonsense talk because
I've been told that it's not the kindest way to be, and that it's not everybody thinks like you do, Rich, and all that. I've been called cold-hearted. I've been
Oh, me too.
Right, all of those things. So I'm like, okay, well, I appreciate that not everybody will appreciate my thinking, but if you go to if you want to listen to that, there's Reach Out for Mental Health. It was with Stu Whiffen and Kirsty Eaton, who's the founder of Reach Out for Mental Health charity, and we speak at length about it. But I was sat there thinking, maybe this doesn't go ahead, maybe he's forgotten, maybe he doesn't want to do it, and maybe that's okay.
So just to jump right to the end of this, because I think it's a good opportunity. So you're sat there, you're nervous. You're not quite sure how it's going to play out. This is what
It wasn't nerves. It was something else.
Yeah, look, you see,
You know what I mean?
you got this sense that,
Yeah.
because I suppose it's one of those topics where you could create a fantastic bond, or you could so easily say the wrong thing.
Oh my God.
And
Instantly.
suddenly, you've created an enemy, right? So now I think it went really well.
Yeah,
You definitely had a bond throughout.
Yeah.
Have you spoken to him since? Did he listen? Is he braver than me and actually listen to the episode?
In fact, I was chatting to him a little bit afterwards. And in fact, I speak to most of the guests, a few times at least afterwards. I think you have a bit of a responsibility to them to talk about how the episode edits down, how it went, even if they're not going to listen. Not every guest will. But, when you think, you've probably been interviewed left and right, maybe you don't listen to everything. But I got a message from Mike. He said, I'm on a train and I've just finished the podcast. It is without doubt the most empathetic, professional, which I didn't expect, and I think it was like caring interview that he'd ever done. And it brought a tear to my eye. This is a man, he's been in journalism 30 years. For Sky News, he'd been out to war-torn countries.
This is the man that's reported on the world's longest sausage. So, I mean, come on.
Do you know what? I kept bringing it back up.
You did.
But again, that's because, it's not gallows, but it's, I have a responsibility in that room as well for it not to, and to listeners as well, for it not to just be relive your trauma for me, relive your grief.
Absolutely.
And so I want to, in that moment, bring it back to something light. The world's largest sausage, or Britain's largest sausage, or whatever the hell it was. He smiled, and you can tell, it just it just deflates that balloon for a minute.
And I think that's probably even more important with somebody like Mike, because Mike is as media trained as you can possibly be. Mm-hmm. So, when you hear like CEOs talk on the news and stuff, I don't know how much of it is their words, but it's a craft.
I usually help with those messages, right? I media train people. I have done for 15 years. The last 5 to 10, obviously much more so since I've been senior. Half of what they say is written by people like me. Yeah. And that's in Andrew's episode, we go through that.
And so to sort of lighten the mood, catch them off guard a little bit with some lighthearted comments, that those walls come down. Yeah. And then because I think, and you do sort of notice it as well, actually, because when he starts, you can immediately tell that this is somebody who's spoken professionally before. He's got a mannerism.
He has lines. He has lines that he says. Yeah. And, lines that I knew that he'd say. Lines that are fundamentally brilliant because they are so concise as to be perfect
for
sound bites.
But I think, you could see that it relaxed over time. And then we got to see the real, in inverted commas, the real Mike, which I think is what you're trying to.
It's all I want to do. It's all I want to do, because everybody responds to grief differently. This is a man that's been through something horrible, and a family that have been through something tough. Moments before Ross took his own life, he's writing a letter and he's saying, that the support for mental health needs to improve, and that's the beauty of Mike's message and Ross's message. There is, something needs to change here. And in his last moments, he's thinking of other people, and that was Mike's point. And you can't help but feel the weight of that. And I was very keen in the room to allow those moments where they arose, and you hear it, you hear the emotion, you hear him tearfully, and there's nothing like being sat in front of a man that you've just met who's bearing his soul, and he's crying about his son that took his own life. But also, I've been in that situation before. I've been in a situation before with friends, family, loved ones, where you're in a dark moment, and you have because you're uncomfortable, you have to stop it. Hell no. If you could be somebody that supports that person through a difficult time, and I'm not saying that Mike certainly doesn't need that from me, but what he needs is for his message to be heard, and I think it was heard fucking loud and clear.
I think so, and I think that it's a skill, right? So I'm somebody that really struggles to let silence sit. I'm like, I'll fill this. I'll come up with something to talk about.
Most people do that. We're taught to.
And sometimes I think you do need to just let that sit, let him gather his thoughts.
On that note, he glazed over a couple of times, more than a couple of times in the episode. And we covered it with some edits sometimes, but left some other space in it at other points, because he would be speaking about something, and then you'd see it. He'd get lost in a thought about Ross, and you'd see a tear form. And it could be 20 seconds, 30 seconds. And, you sat there letting that happen. And then he'd come back to the room and he'd say, I'm so sorry, I just went somewhere. I don't know where. And that happened more than we kept in the edit. It's, without being too conceited, it's why I know this is an important thing to be doing, because there's something happening in these conversations that people will see from next series, but feel in this one and hear in this one is, there's something wonderful that happens when there's real honesty and truth. And as I say, my aim is not to make this a woe is me, this is the worst, this is horrible. I want lightness too. And Christ, if we can find lightness in an episode about suicide, and we did and we do, then I think, I don't want this to be a comedy podcast either. There are plenty of those, but it's about striking a balance and being human. And I think that's what the medium does.
Conversation goes up and down and all over them. Well, certainly ours do.
Yeah. Stokes, it's 2 a.m. Why are we talking about bananas?
Why are we half a bottle of whiskey down?
That's the thing. These conversations would be very, very different, as in, with the guests, if there was drink involved and all that stuff. So I'm glad that there hasn't once been yet, because I need and want.
Oh, it could be funny though, like a podcast version of Drunk Histories. That could be you're missing a trick there.
Maybe.
Now, I'm not an expert on this, right? Just say that up front. Someone once told me that when they were growing up, there wasn't any education around drugs. So in school, they didn't talk about drugs. And so a lot of people he knew fell into the trap of drugs. And when he would talk to those people, they would say, we just didn't know. We just didn't know how bad it could genuinely be. There just wasn't the education out there. And I think what the statistics do show is that sort of talking sort of 80s kind of time, that then over the years, and it takes a while to bed in, but over the years, opiate addictions, things like that, have trended down. Mm-hmm. And I think what I'm hoping is that we're seeing a few green shoots now for mental health. So I know obviously Mike's message is that there's not enough support there, but certainly in my experience, so I've got 2 secondary school aged kids, and the support within the school, I think, is brilliant. Mm-hmm. So all the parents next week have been invited to a self-harm workshop with a third party. They're coming in and sort of explaining to parents about what self-harm is, why do children do it, what can you do to support. There's multiple counselling services within the school, and so both external that come in, but then they also offer it internally as well. And the education, and they're just talking about it more. So I don't think we'll necessarily start to see an improvement for a while, because there's obviously a lead time on these things. But if that starts to be embedded in schools across the country, everyone is more informed. Mm-hmm. Everyone then understands that there is support, that it's not a struggle you have to go through yourself, and that you can talk to people. They can teach you those techniques. So I've been through CBT myself. I found it really useful. Don't use it all the time. I always boast in it, and it annoys people. I say I completed therapy because I finished my course earlier than I was supposed to. But I didn't take it as serious as I should. But actually, the few things I took away have really helped me when I'm feeling like low and struggling. So I think if
do you mind sharing what that is? Obviously CBT is it's cognitive behavioral therapy, right? Yeah. So I know how it's beneficial in that it's an interruptive kind of treatment, or an interruptive therapy for ill thoughts, right? So
it reprograms your brain. The best thing that worked for me, so there's a few different thoughts, and I can't remember them all, but it's black and white thinking, catastrophizing, and others, right? But the way that I was able to put that into practice is, so we're all our own worst critic, and your internal monologue can be horrible.
You wouldn't ever talk to somebody else like it, would you?
And that's the point, right? So the way that I talked to myself, or used to talk to myself, was pretty rubbish. Like every time I walk past the mirror, I'd go, just die. And then I'd just walk off, right? And that's not how you should be talking to yourself, right? And it was exactly what you said, is that if a friend came to you with exactly the problem you've got, what would you say to them? And then once you understand how you would help a friend, you then just turn it around and go, okay, well, that's how I should look at it myself. So so all that nonsense that I would be selling myself is not what you tell a friend. And just being able to visualize it that way, I think has been really powerful in resetting my thoughts. And if I'd have been taught that when I was 11, then, I am who I am. I'm quite happy with who I am. But if I had happened when I was 11, who could I have been?
See, I think that, we spoke
because I didn't learn it till I was 32, I think it was, when I went for mine. So only a few years ago.
And do you feel like you use it regularly?
So I use it. I use it subconsciously more than anything. So I don't actively do it, which is what you are supposed to do. You're supposed to be very front of mind. But I'm not one of these people that can do that mindfulness exercise where, but I do notice it when I am feeling bad. Like, oh, actually I've used that without realizing that I've used it.
Reframing thoughts is very helpful. I don't think, reframing whole emotions that you are supposed to go through, in and around trauma in particular is,
absolutely.
So maybe I feel like I did semi-practice CBT at a very young age without knowing that that's what I was doing, because it is a reframing of thoughts. It's, okay, well, this is happening. What are you going to do about it?
The main criticism of CBT, I think, it doesn't care about why. So I think a lot of people, I feel this way. I felt this way for ages. I want to know what caused me to be broken. And actually, Sean talks to it in his episode.
Well, let's move to it. Sean's the next one. So
there you
that's
go.
a very seamless way. It's like you are a professional, my friend.
Yeah, so he talks to it about, if I find out what it is, I might lose who I am. And I know you've said things like that.
We're talking about Sean Conway. Sean Conway is an ultra endurance athlete. He was episode 10. He owns every record that could possibly be broken. An incredibly wonderfully driven individual. At the time of speaking, he'd not long finished, or a month or two ago, had finished the Ironman 105, which was 105 Ironman triathlons in 105 days. Every single day for 105 days. So swim, cycle, run. I remember a time we talked about in the episode where 50 marathons in 50 days was an incredible achievement. That was Dean Carnes. And that was within...
Didn't Eddie Izzard do that?
Eddie Izzard did a marathon a day for X number of days, yeah.
Yeah.
What Sean does is another level. It's almost an alien level of achievement.
I just need to pick you up there, right? So I can just about do 3K as a run, right? And then my brain is going, what the hell are you doing? This is ridiculous. Stop. Yeah. So what Sean does is insane.
Yes.
Even to run a marathon.
Oh, it's incredible.
It's insane.
Oh, yeah, no,
right.
It's absolutely incredible.
I feel like we down-talk that a little.
Oh, I don't want to downplay it for a minute.
Because what that is, the Eddie Izzard thing, and exactly the same with a lot of the people that you've spoken to, it is just pure strength of will. Just to jump back to Calder, right? Her talking about her experiences at this, she's talking about breaking her own arm, right, to get out of it, but she finds something in herself to go, no, I'm going to finish it.
It was the messages from people every day. She had a message from the people that they were raising money for. So it was people in and around the charity, I think, in and around Climbing Out, that she had a message of inspiration every day that she read. And I forget how many days she ended up doing it, but I know she said that it was a lot more.
Well, she did 500 miles more than she was supposed to.
Yeah, because of the drift.
Right.
But so
crazy.
Strength of mind, yes.
Yeah. But now this is going to sound stupid, right? And I'm happy to be the dumbest person in the room. That's normally where I sit, right? I don't know what I thought happened, right? But with this Ironman thing, I don't know how I thought it worked. But in my head, I think I thought it was like some kind of Forrest Gump type situation.
No.
Because when I found out he went home every day, that completely blew me away. I just assumed he was running further and further away from his house every time I did. It hadn't even crossed my mind that he could be going in a circle.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly. I think he went to the local swimming centre.
Yeah,
did that, cycled, and then ran around the coast. I think was what he told me. And I think he's got kids, right? So at some stage, that sort of thing catches up with you, and you can't be as selfish as you once possibly were.
Yeah, I hadn't put enough thought into think what's the practicalities of doing 105 Ironmans in a row. And the idea that he went home and spent time with his kids,
My main thinking prior to speaking to Sean was, I don't want to make it all about the Ironman. I want to know who he is. And in fact, that's some of the best stuff we got is stuff I'd never heard before about his dad in Zimbabwe, around the time of Mugabe, who rounded on all the
white farmers,
but also the gamekeeper.
That was interesting, wasn't it? They thought that they could become a militia,
which they bloody well could.
They could have done.
They're all armed. So Mugabe had one eye on all of those people over there with guns. That number thousands of people. Let's make their lives difficult, and he did.
It was just interesting how blasé he was. Around, he was blasé about everything.
I was just about to say,
his whole personality was blasé. Anyone could do it if they wanted to. Was his comment around,
which I obviously picked up, and I'm like, no, Sean.
But when you're talking about having grenade screens on your windows
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And the way he says, "Oh yeah, but it's fine, don't worry about it." It makes you think about the violence in the world in a bit of a different way. We are very privileged to live where we live, where obviously bad things do happen here, but the reason they hit the news is because they're so rare.
Yes.
To live in anywhere in the world,
I think,
where that is a possibility at any time, and be so not okay with it, but just that's just day to day.
Well, I think it speaks to the human spirit and or what we are able to find is our new normal. And without getting too Holocaust about this, look at the things that people just accepted as normal because, well, that's just the way it is. It's just the regime. That's just what happens to those people, and you dehumanize people. And doubtless Sean's family and the fact that he is quite blasé about things, I tried to get into,
didn't want to know, does he?
He didn't want to know. I tried to get into, like his family and, did that have an impact? And, he went off to boarding school, which he said was very common in South Africa. He said, it's not dispassionate. It's just, it was that bit more.
I suppose everyone he was at boarding school was going to be experiencing the same thing, right?
Exactly. So Sean was a very funny one for me because I knew about Sean beforehand.
Yeah, of the adventurers that you've spoken to, he was the one.
I've obviously done work in and around this space, helped a lot of people in and around this space over the years. So I knew Sean. Sean was a master at building his own brand. He understood that there is power in looking a certain way, and I think, he did lean into it. And he said at one point, it almost got cartoonish, and, he had to kind of pull it back. So I knew Sean. I didn't know what I was going to get. I left the interview feeling like, I leave most of them feeling like we've really connected. And, we bonded on a really human level because we just had a few hours of conversation that, yes, gets distilled into something for people to listen to. But with Sean, I was like, would we get on in a pub? Could we have a beer and just, chill out and just shoot the shit and, just talk about nothing? And Sean said it himself. He's like, I don't have many friends. I don't have, many people I spend that much time with, And then on reflection, I think I really, really liked him. I really liked him.
I think he came across really well. Obviously, he must be an intense person because he is focus personified, right?
Yes.
And I don't think you have much time for anything else when you've got young kids and then you just happen to be, I can't even imagine how long it would take me to do that Ironman. I'd probably take me 3 months to finish one, right? So yeah, he's not going to have time to do that. It sounds like he's going to take a bit of a break now, hopefully that allows him to ground himself again.
Yeah.
But I remember the thing that always stuck with me, I think it was after he'd done the swim around Britain.
Yeah.
In one of the interviews, he was saying how his tongue started falling apart. And so he'd be swimming and he'd feel something in his mouth and it was like a chunk of tongue that had come off.
Pretty grim.
This is all the salt water and everything. Yeah. And I don't know about you. If I'm partaking in an activity and my tongue starts falling apart, I'm probably going to stop.
Got no stamina, mate. That's
I'm probably going to stop.
You just don't care enough. You don't care enough about.
I clearly don't, and I think I'm okay with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that shows the type of person.
Yeah.
Because he must have been doing that one for charity. I imagine all of these are to.
It was his first one. Swimming the Naked of Britain was his first big thing that he did.
But to put yourself through that hell to not really know what that's going to do.
Yeah.
Like once you've got a brand and you're going to be raising a lot of money for people.
I think the same about David Blaine. It's like, you don't know what that's going to do to your body. Yeah. You don't know standing in that block of ice for however long. You don't know. And I guess that's the pioneer aspect or nature of this stuff. As I say, I think Sean, I loved hearing about his upbringing. Less about his upbringing and more about, I guess, his late teens, 20s, and the struggle he went through and the financial implications of moving here from South Africa and all that stuff. Because I don't want to speak too much to the people that can do these ultra endurance events, but you would imagine they tend to skew more affluent and better from an upbringing perspective because
it takes a lot of time, a lot
of money, a lot of effort, and a lot of support from people around.
You need a big team.
You need a team, right? So I didn't know anything about Sean. I know he's obviously written his books. But, I didn't know what his life looked like pre this stuff. And to find out that he was essentially just a normal bloke that worked at Snappy Snaps, it was good. It was good with bloody Photoshop.
And you think of that journey as well. I always wonder what makes somebody who they are, and
Well, that's why I'm doing this thing, mate.
Well, absolutely. But it's also like, what would often trip people up. Now, when he's talking about he's got the spot behind the sofa in a crappy little bedsit somewhere, and then 2 years later he finds himself behind the same sofa in the same crappy little bedsit. I mean, that's one of those make or break moments, I think, isn't it? Where you're going,
what is my life?
Yeah, where am I going? What am I trying to achieve?
Yeah.
Because when you first move over to a new country, I imagine that is a perfectly good arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to build something, because he didn't sort of suggest that anything had fundamentally gone wrong in those 2 years to bring him back there. It was just fate got him there, and that almost seemed, hopefully that kind of galvanized him a little bit.
I think so. I think it then took him to a little bit later on, the whole he sold his business for £1 back to his mate. I think it's wonderful to hear somebody, again, financial motivation for most of these people that we've spoken to. For some, it's there, but for most of them, it's about security and then move beyond that. And I think it's amazing to think that you could be someone like Sean, who's still living a comfortable life, done well, but you find that thing that you're good at, passionate about, and or driven in relation to, and you can make everything else follow. It truly was one of those, do what you love sort of situations.
And if that doesn't work, just go back into the movie industry. What?
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, again. Oh, you just worked on Harry Potter, did you? You just did the stills on Harry Potter. But again, I love how that sort of thing happens, that serendipity, that I just happened to know this person that knew that person that needed this. And my skills, my very particular set of skills, led me to basically not being allowed to talk to Danny Radcliffe. As with everybody, I was going to say a fascinating bloke, as if we've had one guest that isn't fascinating. As I say, I went to that not knowing what to make of him. I left it not quite knowing what to make of him. It wasn't until the edit that I thought, what a bloke.
Yeah.
What a good guy. Yeah, I think, was there anything that came out of the episode for you?
You sort of asked him about what drives you, what's, clearly there's a screw loose in there, Sean. What's going on? And he was very clear he does not want to know.
Yeah.
And you asked him a couple of times, and he's like, mate, I don't want to know.
Yeah.
Because he is who he is. He's able to achieve these things because of who he is and whatever made him that way.
Yeah.
And if he finds out and he then loses that ability, he might become better in another aspect of his life, but his identity then disappears.
Yeah.
And I think you have to respect that, right? As long as he's a functional human being, right, and a fundamentally good person, which, from everything I've heard, yes, he is. So, so I completely get that.
Yeah.
So, we're linking it back to that mental health conversation, is that I think if you can crack it early, which is what the schools are trying to do, then there's you become who you are. There is nothing to unpick.
I've had that concern myself, and I think you were going to touch on it when we first started talking about Sean, is that I've often said, I don't want to fix that bit in me that makes me angry, that bit in me that gives me that drive, because if I do, then what? And to an extent, and I spoke about this on that other mental health podcast, to an extent, therapy, fine. But what it does is cuts you open and fails to sew you back up. It gives you a needle and thread and says, fucking do this yourself when you're ready to, and you don't quite know how to. And I do think that for me, I can't speak for everybody, I can only ever speak for myself, obviously. Like for me, optimism, positivity, drive, all of these things are in doing. So doing this podcast, creating things, going out there, even if it doesn't work, even if it fails, and then even like this, it's successful. You objectively successful. Charts every week, top 0.01% of podcasts, still not enough. And if there's something about me that just allowed me to be okay with that and just to take a step back and say, oh, well, pat myself on the back. I haven't done that yet and I won't do that. Is it where it could be? And it's not.
Yeah, and that's so again, something's broken in your brain, but it's broken in a good way.
I hope so, because the second that I have spoken to a therapist, I've done those things, and then I did feel like I lost a bit of myself.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to say, isn't it? It's obviously talking about our own experiences and everything, and I think both yourself, Sean, achieving, it's working to your benefit, whatever it is, it's working to your benefit to be successful and to keep you driving forward. Obviously, those people where they feel it's holding them back, then it's a completely different
Oh my
experience.
God, yeah,
right?
completely.
You know, if what you're going through is keeping you in bed,
Yeah.
and you're losing your friends, and you just don't have, you're not feeling like you anymore, then actually receiving treatment is going to
Completely
then
agree.
bring you back to where,
Which is
to
what
where
I
you
meant
were.
by, I can only speak for myself, because there's people out there that, they don't have control in their lives, or they feel like they don't have that direction, or, or whatever it is that keeps them in bed, or keeps them from pursuing something, striving for something outside of upset, unhappiness, torment, whatever you call it. After Sean, we found ourselves in the company of, in fact, the first ever interview I did.
2-part.
Probably, the first 2-part episode we've ever done, probably the best rugby sevens player to ever live. And possibly, you've got other incredible players like Vasal Seserevi for Fiji that are just incredible to watch. But yeah, as you said, Dan's got the records. Dan's the highest try scorer by some bloody distance. And what that man can't do on a rugby pitch isn't worth doing. So I think Dan was incredibly gracious in being the first person to say, yes, I'll give you my time. I'd asked him a few times, and he relented and said, all right, Rich,
Influencing skills.
Yeah, well, I think he had no good reason to. I think we did know each other, as he said. We did play to a decent standard together, to a point. And then obviously he kicked on. But he didn't owe me anything. But what he did was he gave me his time, and I'll always be grateful. And then I proceeded to have a terrible 18 months or so with the business and the market, and PR marketing was just on its ass, and things weren't fun. Where it was on my mind all the time. I'm thinking, I just asked, the record try scorer, Olympian, silver medal winning Olympian, for a bit of his time, and I'm probably putting too much emphasis on all of that. But either way, if Dan does listen to this, I just need him to know, and I have told him. Then and
he's
since,
such a lovely guy.
how
I
much I
don't
appreciate
think
it.
he's going to be holding any grudges.
But it was important to me that I let him know that, because we sat on his episode then and edited it. In fact, his episode was for the producers that I interviewed. I had them also then edit the Dan Norton interview.
I know, I listened to them.
You said, yeah, of course you did. You helped me make decisions.
I've listened to that episode like 5 times.
Different edits as well. Different. We had one, didn't we? BBC guy that went down a really different route with it and all that. But he,
it was interesting to see the different takes on how they thought
I think
the information should be put across.
For me, the main thing is it's conversational and flowing. That's what I want. I don't want these stings and plosive kind of moments where it's like, I was listening to an American podcast last night, Dateline, and coming up, this cowboy gets taken for a ride. But it's that, it's a very different style of podcast. And I think my favorite ones are these, they luxuriate in the longer form style. So anyway, so Dan's was the interview that producers edited for the role. I completely forgot that I did that.
I didn't realise how long it was between
18 months, man.
Yeah, I didn't realise it was that long.
Yeah, 18 months, and a lot changed for Dan, a lot changed for me in that time. So Dan at the end of the first record, which we did on Zoom with AirPods, so the quality was shocking, and you could really hear that. And as I think I said, I was a tiny bit nervous, not because it was Dan, but because I'm like, Rich, is everything you want to do. You've been talking about this, like I have copious notes of what I wanted to do, and gone through 40 different names for the podcast in my head, and before kind of settling on anything, and even when I interviewed him, it was called something different then.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure in the Marnie Swindles one, she refers to it as a different podcast, and I think you have a note that says, it was called something different back then. It's now the starting line. So
yeah. I feel like with Marnie, it might have already been the starting line, but either way with Dan, it certainly wasn't. But a lot changed for him because he was going off to China to coach, so he was going to be retiring. He still had a couple of tournaments left that would take him somewhere near the top in terms of tournaments played.
You say he got to 92, and I think the record was 95 or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. But so he was going off to pursue this coaching career, and I think it was the Thursday or the Wednesday or Thursday beforehand, before the Monday, I said, right, Daniel's is the next one up, and he said, God, really? I was like, yeah. He said, that was so long ago. He said, so much has changed. He said, would you be open to recording a second part? I was like, yes. So we set it up and we spoke that Saturday for a rush edit to get it ready for the Monday, for midnight, 12:01 a.m. Monday. And I'm so glad that we did. So glad it pulled it, really tied it up. It was a great opportunity for Dan. In the first one, he was a professional rugby player. That's what he did. In the second one, he's a retired sportsman looking back and somebody that's done coaching and all these things. And he's on a corporate journey now. He's post rugby. It was, and I've said it since, it's a distillation. It's a time capsule. Each of those interviews, each half of that interview to me is special because it's a time capsule of this is what I was and this is what I'm going to be.
So obviously that's for Dan.
Yes.
What are your reflections? Your first interview.
Yeah.
And then after you'd done a load of them.
My main reflection is that in my first conversation with Dan, it's a ton of statements, not questions. So I'd tell him something he already knows about himself and then say, what do you think? So you've scored lots of tries. Why? Do you know what I mean? I think at one point I even say, and I do mean it, but I'm like, so Dan, you're not the quick, he's rapid, one of the quickest players we've ever played with, right? And I should say, Stokes used to play with Dan as well.
Never at county.
Never at county. I think I said to him, so there are people that are quick. There are people with incredible steps. There are people that can kick, chase, score. I was like, but what makes you different? Or something. It was like just a shit question.
I mean,
it's formulated badly.
It sounds like a good question.
But it's terrible.
But it's one of those hard ones to answer, isn't
you
it?
Go,
you've not given much room.
Because what I meant to say was effectively get to who you are and why you are who you are. We say it every time. What I'm inferring with that question is, mate, there's something different. Top few inches of your bloody head, there's something different in there. It wasn't so much of an interview as statement, response, question, response, statement, response. And the second half, I hope that people can tell that I'm so much more comfortable doing it. There is something unnatural about being sat in front of a mic, like the second, and I'll say it now, and it'll take you out of it for 5 seconds, and then you get back into it, and then it's like you can forget that there's a mic there. But when I was interviewing him that first time, I didn't forget for a second that I was interviewing somebody. I didn't forget for a second that I was putting heaps of pressure on this being something I've wanted to do forever and would be interested in making this my life. Interested in, okay, you can do this thing for a living, you really can. So it became a pressure, became a bigger weight than I think I was ready for at the time. I think I'm hopefully better now. I'll only get better. But yeah, my reflection of that is the first half, audio was terrible and my interview technique wasn't quite what it could or what it should have been and hopefully what it's grown into.
What we've heard even today, driving Shropshire up to Sheffield, obviously you're making the decision to, I want to do it in person.
Yeah.
And potentially as a blessing in disguise that your first one was a bit of a, tinny audio with the earphones and stuff that you thought, actually, no, now I know what I want to do moving forward. It's easier to do it when you're face to face. So that's quite a good learning experience, right?
Exactly. Every single one otherwise has been in person. And in fact, I've had some incredible guests that I could have done Zooms with that I haven't. And I've said that I'll wait in person. Like Ren, for instance, the rapper Ren.
Love Ren.
Incredible, not just a rapper, in fact, musician, artist. So I've had some opportunities, but I want to do it in person. There's something different about it. There's something you cannot replace. Again, I've taken my company, we're all back in the office because it's a creative industry. I don't think you can beat bouncing off of somebody in person.
No, you can.
And there's work that you can certainly do separate to, not in the same room as another person.
I was going to save this for the next one, but we've got that now. But yeah, because obviously there's comments around working from home, but I do the comment I've always had. So I'm happy working from home because I'm established in my career.
Yeah.
But I know that I'm only where I am because I was able to bounce off experienced people and pick up on chat that I would never have heard otherwise.
It's that osmotic learning.
Absolutely. Right? And that's what the offices do give. But that's something really hard to quantify.
If anybody wants to hear me speak specifically to this, there's a podcast called the Digital PR Podcast. And I went on that a month or two back, speaking exactly about this as somebody that believes fundamentally in the power of being together. in a creative working environment. So if you want to hear that, go find that. It's a chat, me and an employee that loves the fact that she gets to work at home. So, a recent mum that she's like, well, this is great for me. It's like, completely appreciate that. It's horses for courses. Everyone's different. Right?
Like, so I wouldn't be able to have my job now if I had to go into the office. I only took it because it was remote, because their head office is not local.
Right.
Like, I'm not willing to commute 2 hours each way every day. So then,
because you don't care.
The job,
because you just don't
certainly
care.
Don't care enough to do that, right? Because also that means my home office would be there, so then I'm paying for that travel, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't make any sense. But the remote has allowed me to take an opportunity that's worked out really well for me, because the geographical restrictions have been removed.
Yeah.
So there's absolute benefits for it.
For some people, that's, for some careers, for some jobs, that's wonderful. It works.
But we need to bring this back to Dan because
we do.
it was a good chat, and obviously like him talking about going to China. China's one of those weird places, right? We don't know
much about it.
It
feels otherworldly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously the language barrier is so far removed because obviously the alphabet's completely different. So it's going to be a lot harder to pick up, obviously. And I think the point you made is really valid, right? Even though you've got a translator, how do you create rapport? How do you create trust when you're not really talking to them?
Yeah.
And that must have been a real challenging situation.
Completely agree. I mean, it's a challenging situation they knew that they were getting themselves into. And I mean by this, the Chinese Rugby Union. And one that I felt pissed off on his behalf for when they, a few months in, say, this isn't working, we're letting you all go.
I mean, he scored a try for him, for God's sake.
He did score a try for him. So, all right, before we jump onto that, and I do want to, I just think if you're going to bring some of the best players to ever do this, and it didn't work for a few months, so, let's throw that baby out with the bathwater. It's like, did you ever want it to work in the first place?
Just very short-sighted, isn't it?
Super short-sighted. They made their decision. It is what it is. Dan is doing incredibly well where he is now in Dubai, and as you say, he's found his way into that corporate world. But in that post-rugby world and what that looks like to him.
I think he'll do brilliantly. Like he's such a nice
all the
guy.
Attributes, right?
Yeah.
Sociability, social intelligence. I've said it on this podcast before. I'll say it again. Social intelligence is far more important to me than academic intelligence. I can teach you. I can't teach you how to be. Yeah. I can support, but in a social setting, intelligence means
especially it sounds like he's gone into a bit of a salesy.
It's more salesy, it's more personable.
And you've got, people have got to buy into you as a person. So he's got this brilliant thing to go, by the way, I'm the best to ever do it. And I'm a really nice guy.
Yeah.
And you'll want to sell to me. You'll want to buy from me.
I think that
because my smile is infectious.
He is a Jack the Lad type.
Yeah.
He's a bit silly with it, and that is, as you rightly said, it's infectious. And to your point, I was Googling around to see, his record, while coaching China and all that stuff. Googling about Dan and China led me to a Reddit post that said, is this Dan Norton scoring for China? So I clicked on it, and this YouTube video had about 50 views. And it was a 16-minute long video, and at about 12 minutes, whatever, you see Dan run onto the pitch in full Chinese kit. I mean, his first touch of the ball is length of the field try. And this is a man that's just retired. I mean, he did say to me after the fact,
retiring from England,
is very different.
Is very
so then
different
going and playing a load of villagers.
Because I can't remember how he described it, but he sort of, obviously you've got the Premier tier, which is your Englands, your Fijis, people like that, and then you've got the second tier, or the Asian Nations Cup, I think they called it, didn't it? Which is the one that they're trying to up and come.
So he's scored this phenomenal try for China anyway. So that was his final international try. The commentators can't believe it. They're like, what? This was not the name we had written down. But yeah, it was wonderful. Great interview. Hugely appreciative of Dan.
And a boy from Gloucester.
Lad from Gloucester.
Which is nice.
Yeah. The next episode. I said earlier on about an episode I wasn't sure, or about a recording I wasn't sure that I should go ahead with in speaking to Mike. And only because I wasn't sure that I could do it the justice that it deserved. Now, this one was one that I wasn't sure about because we've been going back and forth for months. And in researching, I then found out that he'd said some daft things that had got him kicked off of Twitter. He's now back on Twitter. That daft thing was someone should stop the Muslim mayor, and Then when somebody responded to him and he said someone should kill him. It's fucking daft, right? Just more than daft. Yeah. But surely, I thought, not the sum of a person. And this is a man that is 72 years old. He sold his business. So this is Charlie Mullin's OBE. He was made an OBE in 2015. Sold his business, Pimlico Plumbing, 2 years ago for 147 million. Rags to riches. That's the best way to describe. Charlie grew up in North London, or born in North London, grew up there for a bit, then moved south. I was like, right, well, this is a real no-nonsense bloke. That's his brand. He knows we're talking about Sean and we're talking about brands. Charlie knows brand, and he knows, well, if I grow my hair this way, if I, change my appearance in XYZ way, then I become recognizable. And he likes it. He likes being recognized. But I was uncertain. I was like, oh man, you could have not done that. We were supposed to be speaking anyway. I wanted to speak to you because, you are a good candidate for the starting line. You are controversial. He already was. He is an interesting man. And I thought, right, well, that thing that he said, as long as I talk to him about it, do it some justice of conversation so he can explain himself. Or, he'd already apologised and I'd already been told by his PR people, listen, he's already apologised. You don't have to talk about that. I thought, well, it's my podcast. and I want to know, I want to sit across from somebody, because I think that we've stopped being able to do this in society, sit across from somebody that, might say something I don't necessarily agree with and try to understand him anyway. And try to get to, why he might have said that. Is it the kind of person he is? Is it his upbringing? Blah blah blah. Is it? How does he feel about that on reflection? And I don't buy his response, which was, but he is a Muslim, so of course I would say Muslim mayor, because he said, well, if he's Irish, I'd say Irish mayor, which I contest.
But also, I don't think that's any better.
It's not, right?
Because in the time that he grew up, what were the signs?
No blacks, no dogs, no Irish.
Yeah. So
I know.
Yeah.
But my point, and I didn't actually say it or articulate it as well as I meant to in the room, was, okay, Islam is a religion. If you knew that he was a Catholic, would you have said someone needs to stop the Catholic mayor? You wouldn't.
I don't think you would.
I think Muslim is a proxy word for brown in this context.
And also, it's I can't think of the word, but it's like an incendiary type word.
Yeah.
Like it's going to spark something. Do you know what I mean? Because there are movements within countries that have got problems. Mm-hmm. So the thing is, obviously, we've all grown up with what's been going on in Iraq and Afghanistan and 9/11 and all of that stuff. So it creates a certain narrative, doesn't it?
I think.
But what I did find really interesting, and he's absolutely a polarizing figure.
Yeah, sure.
But he seems oblivious to it. So he knows he's in trouble.
It's because his success has come in spite of, or despite that controversy.
Yeah, because obviously you asked him, and I think it was a really well framed question of, so you want to be mayor, X% of London.
I want to say a fifth if my research is still in my brain.
It's in the 20s. Of X. So let's say 20% of London is made up of British Asian. How are they now going to vote for you? And it's like it didn't even cross his mind that
he went, well, they still will. Yeah, because it's about and do you know what, they might, because if he can say, as he in his words, he said, well, it's about making life better for people, and cool, and that's. I mean,
it was a great response, but it kind of, I don't like to say it because like you said, I don't think it defines people, but people are of their time, right? And he is an old man, right? And there's things that my grandparents' generation would have said that now would be completely unacceptable.
You pull them up on it.
Well, you would, but also that there's actually no meaning behind it. Mm. It's just what they grew up. It's the terminology they grew up with. There was no ill feeling sat behind the word, and it was just what they said. Yeah. And so, by the way he sort of said, "Oh, well, of course they'll still vote for me." Yeah. It's almost like he didn't put the connection together. You've said this.
I mean, I think, I completely get that, and I think he did say at one point, he was like, I think we're making too much of the Muslim mayor stuff, and that's fair. I just wanted to talk to him about it. I mean, during that conversation, he did get a call from GB News about a Carol Vorderman controversy. She'd said some things about the RAF, and it was like he was sprung. He's a coiled spring waiting to go. He's on the phone to a producer, and we're there listening to it, where he's like instant instant kind of anti-Vorderman rhetoric, because that's the kind of speech that gets you on news channels. Because I think she should be stripped of this, stripped of that. I think it's disgraceful, blah, blah, blah. And just to watch the man go into action quite so quickly, quite so defiantly and definitely, was kind of something to behold, actually. And I did ask him the question. I was like, do you believe everything you say? Do you think you're a controversial figure? And he was like, well, I wouldn't say it if I didn't. It's like, well, I don't know that I believe that, because you must know that. Like, what do you care about that? And, one of his things that he said, and I loved it, was, she should stick to what she knows, which is TV presenting. And I wanted to pipe up and be like, so does that mean you should only stick to plumbing? Or I should only stick to PR? And I don't believe that that's true. I don't think we should. I think, we are multifaceted. We can hold many more than one thought in our brain and about, many more than one thing. And clearly he does. He's got opinions on lots of different ranges, a big range of issues, and that's okay. So it just made me smile. I came away from it. I really liked him.
I spoke to somebody about that episode, and they'd said to me that they just didn't vibe with him at all. It was very quickly into the podcast they realised that this isn't some. They listened to it because they're supporting the podcast.
Yeah,
but they knew quite quickly, I'm not going to like this man.
Right.
I actually didn't feel that. I'd say I don't agree with all his views, and I think certainly when you're in, well, everybody should, but certainly when you're in the public eye, of course you moderate what you're saying and be very careful. If you don't mean something, then stay away from it. Do you know what I mean? But he's, it just seems like a bit of a sort of Jack the Lad type guy. He's got an interesting, in a very different way, interesting backstory. And you can sort of see you've got to be impressed by what you built. You have to be.
See, one of my thoughts as I came away from that was, I am not impressed by opulence. I'm not impressed by a £10 million apartment. That doesn't do anything for me. Seeing a council estate that's now been turned into what is effectively just this incredibly glamorous hotel-like, luxurious apartment where, it's owned by by somebody that doesn't even live in this country, and they just install a couple of mistresses, which I've seen. And it doesn't really do anything for me. The idea of, I know we joked in the last one about Haley's Ferrari, big posh cars. That doesn't really, there are certainly things that I'll spend money on, and it's not that sort of thing. But you can completely understand why somebody that grew up with holes in his clothes reaches for it. I mean, I've talked before about
his Sunday best being everyone else's bomb site.
Yeah, right. And I think that's what I wanted to get to with him, was he is a fascinating guy. I did come away from it liking him. I do feel like he's an inspirational person in many ways. He just shoots from the hip.
He cares about London.
Oh, Christ, he does. That does come through. It does really come through. And as I say, I appreciated his time. He was full of innuendo and jokes and, silly things, certain things that we had to cut out, because I think that, in the wrong context, they don't show him or me for having not even responded to them in the best light. But, at a certain point, just like your grandparent analogy then, what do you kind of speak to, and what do you just go, okay, well, that's them. But either way, fascinating episode. I was concerned about how it might be construed. I hope he appreciates that it's been both edited in terms of, stuff being taken out or moved around or whatever, but also, it's been promoted with a genuine affection for him. Really enjoyed that episode. So on to the series finale. The final guest of the first series of the Starting On podcast was Susie Chan. Do you enjoy it?
I really did. Yeah, again, not someone I'd come across before. I'm not in the Peloton space, so I wouldn't have come across her. But yeah, again, I mean, it's hard because you got to say this about all of everyone you've interviewed, right? But what a life! And I mean, the thing that I think is great with Susie is she was a normal person, and I think quite a lot of your people have been, but smoker, drinker. She gets into her 30s. And then something clicks. Not only does she start a fitness journey, her entire life changes. And I think that's brilliant because, she's a mum. She's probably unhealthy if she's a smoker and a drinker. She's got herself into a bit of a rut. And she finds something from somewhere to go, I'm going to make a change. And we've all got excuses. There's always, oh, it's not the right time. Oh, what about the kids? Oh, I haven't got enough money. Or it's too much of a risk.
Yeah.
She made a dramatic change and now is much better for it.
Yeah.
And it's one of the, there's so many of these stories where it's like, it's never too late. You get to your mid-30s, things can still change, things can still be okay. And I think that's really powerful.
There are many things to say about Susie, and one of them is she, to me, is a perfect end of series guest. The reason being, she is a full stop. She is exactly representative of what I wanted to speak to, which is it's about control, and it's about resilience, and it's about taking accountability for yourself and your own path and your own success. And I think everybody I've spoken to about this episode has said, "Oh, so there's hope for me then." Like they said jokingly, right? There's hope for me, and there is. And it's not just hope; it's that should you want to go down a different path in your life, you could be 50. Morgan Freeman was, that much older. Like, I forget how old he was, maybe even in his 50s, before, his first major film role.
KFC, Colonel Sanders.
Oh, yeah.
KFC wasn't created till he was in his 60s.
So there you go. So you get to these people just because we are shoved, it's shoved in our faces, the idea of success at a young age being the thing to be. These people have got it worked out. Why the fuck haven't you got it worked out?
Well, it's also society, right? So I don't think the younger generations are feeling it so much, right? But certainly we were on the cusp, right? We straddle the old school thinking and the new school thinking. So it's basically the internet did it. But certainly when I was growing up, it was you go to school, if you can go to uni, go to uni. If you can't go to uni, then you get a trade. Mm-hmm. But then quite quickly, and obviously we certainly did, is you start a family, you get a house, and then you just work up the corporate ladder, as whatever that looks like. So that by the time you're our age, mid-30s, then you're settled.
Yeah,
that's you for life now. You're gonna get a flat line, and you're gonna work until you retire. And that's what life looks like. So you get so many people in our situation that maybe haven't ticked certain boxes that feel like they're failing.
Yeah.
And it's like, well no, those aren't the only things that you need to achieve.
And there's a different order of bloody achievement. You don't even need to achieve. That's and I appreciate doing this podcast. You might expect me to say something different, but if you don't have designs on being a world-beating insert thing here, that's okay too. Yeah. So I mean, it's just take from this what you can and will, and I do think that if you have it in you to improve your situation, then maybe we should, because I think development and progress is important. But equally, if you don't want to, fucking hell, nobody has to be born. Nobody said yes please, I want to be born, thank you. So make of it what you want. Make it if that is just being happy, bloody stone carving for your whole life, or insert thing here, there'll be lots of people that are just happy. And she was super happy in her museum job, right?
Yeah.
It just didn't.
Well, that was
money.
Technically her dream job.
It was her dream job,
right?
From the beginning.
It was her dream job until she found her other dream job.
Yeah.
And this is what I think. No one knows what's around the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you have to be open to it. So a lot of people in the sort of corporate normal working world, so not business owners, is they've got their job and they wait in a dead man's shoes situation. They go, oh, well, if I do enough work, then when the next promotion comes up, then hopefully I'll get it.
Yeah.
And then they might not get it, and then rinse and repeat. But the people who I've seen sort of really blossom in that space, they've always got a few options. They're always talking to people, so that if that doesn't play out, well, they've got a backup plan.
Yeah.
They got plan A, plan B, plan C.
For me, it might end up being that this is, as I said earlier on, the thing that I do for the rest of my life, right? It was 35.
Yeah.
And that's the story that I might end up telling in 10 years' time. This gives me something in a way that clearly Susie got that from running. Because, her first race was a half marathon, second race was a marathon, her third race via possibly some other less organised races was the Marathon des Sables, the 250k, 6-day in the Saharan desert race. Absolutely ridiculous. She's done it more times than any other woman. She was infectious. She was supportive. She's been, talking about speaking to the guests after the fact, she's been absolutely lovely. She's posted a good deal about this, and it's ended up being the most listened to episode of the series. Now, that's across You know,
That's because runners get through a hell of a lot of podcasts.
Exactly. I mean, they do.
What else are they going to listen to?
You see the community around it. You know, you see the Peloton community. You see the running community. You know, that you see these people really do rally around her and this. Some incredibly high achieving people that I've seen on social, supporting her and sharing this and all those things. So it's been incredibly well downloaded. But more than that, she's been very supportive, and she was just asked questions that nobody's ever bothered to ask her before, because I care about who she is, not what she does.
Yeah.
And if anything, that's a through line for every single person. I was going to say I'm not impressed by what people do. Of course I am. But I'm even more impressed by why they do that thing.
Yeah.
And I think that came out wonderfully with Susie is, okay, why are you that person? Well, I was really unhappy being that person. And actually I did find this love and support and community and, in this sense. And, she was a single mum, so all this confluence of factors that lead to, okay, that's who you're going to be for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And she makes quite an interesting point as well, because again, to go back to my thing about people, they're always trying to go up the ladder. That's not always right for everybody. Because she said when she was doing the restoration stuff, she was enjoying it. That's what she was there to do. She was hands-on. I'm involved in it. And she said as she got more senior, it was less about that and it was more about admin.
Yeah.
And she didn't like the admin. So she got promoted because that's what you're supposed to do. And then you go, this isn't for me. Like maybe I'm not a people manager. Maybe I'm not somebody that likes doing the admin side.
The better you get it a thing very often in a corporate world, right? The further away from it you get, and the more managing people that are good at that thing, or that they hope can be good at that thing because it's economies of scale. And it's like, okay, well, if you were good at that thing, maybe you can manage 3 people that can become as good at that thing as you were, and that's how we make money. Yet, as you rightly say, that's not the right path for everybody. So Susie was just a great person, as I say, to end on, because that's who I want, the starting line to represent. I want, she represents the starting line fantastically. She started in one place. Life is not a straight line, and she proved it. And I said a second ago that, and that's her set for life. Maybe it's bloody not. Yeah. Maybe in 5 years' time she does something else, and she's got the drive, she's got the ambition, she's got the capability, and clearly that mental strength to push herself in a way. So, maybe she's one of the best stand-ups that's ever existed, but she just doesn't know that yet.
Can you explain something to me though? Right?
Yes.
So because I'm not fitness orientated, so she mentioned taking her mum to the Peloton offices, and her not really understanding what it was, and then suddenly saw a massive picture of her on the wall. So I'm not into Peloton. I understand what it is, but I've never done it.
Yeah.
I mean, are these instructors like
They're like a big deal,
semi-celebrities?
mate. They're genuinely semi-celebrities within the
Are
mix,
people
yeah.
from all over the world going to go, I want to train with Susie because she's awesome, and then we'll
had
sign
a
up?
message from a mutual friend of ours, in fact, after the episode went out, and he sent me a video of him doing one of her classes and was like, no way, you're speaking to Susie. You're speaking to Susie Chan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, they're genuine. So I walked into, so I walked into, they kind of showed us around the main Peloton offices and then the studios where they record and that go out all around the world. And a lucky few get to go in, and she's a tread instructor. So you go into the classroom, and I used to teach spin. So, I know it's vague. I'm kind of familiar with the setup. I'm not familiar with the 50 different cameras and the different angles, and it looked like the Truman Show in there. So you got all these treadmills around, and there's maybe 15, 20 treadmills, maybe fewer. It gets booked up miles in advance, and you can go in.
So there's some people that train in the room.
Some people train in the room,
but then there's
it's
thousands?
all about the thousands that will do the classes. So as we walked into the building with the studios in it, I got a photo of it, of Susie in front of an enormous screen where there's her, noiselessly teaching in the background, or like a promo of her up in bloody 20-foot kind of tall screen. They're within that space. They are well known in that space.
Yeah.
And people love them, and they come to their classes because that's who they want to be taught by. And you can see why she spoke in the episode about the process, the audition process. And you spend 5 minutes in her company, like, you make me want to be better, to do more. And that's clearly what they're looking for. Forever grateful for her. I think she helped to elevate the podcast even further. And it's brought different audience. Each guest brings a completely different audience, but what she's done is given us a really fun way to end what's been and enjoyable, but still at times not a straightforward look at some of the most incredible people I think we've got in this country.
Yeah, and I think the one thing to say as well, haven't they all just been lovely?
Yeah, to a person, pretty much. I mean, I can't think of anybody that hasn't been,
Like infectious positivity from most of them.
Yeah, that's the aim.
And that's so good, isn't it? Because, I don't know, I think sometimes you see when it's business people or driven people, that it's got to be quite a serious endeavour and I've got to be 100% focused on what I'm doing. And maybe, if we're speaking to Dan on game day, maybe he's a little bit different than what he is, right? So maybe it's you've got to switch it on. But everyone's just...
Well, they
just
always
seem
say,
they're just very much enjoying life, aren't they?
Nobody that's enjoyed any degree of success is going to knock you. Like, it's, the most insecure people, the most jealous people.
I think Charlie says that, doesn't he?
Yeah. And I believe it. And I've thought
You've
and articulated similar things in the past, which is, if you're succeeding, you're not going to knock somebody because you see that person succeeding, or you see that person that wants to, and you bring them along with you. You put your arm around them. Nobody is successful will ever slag you off. I'm sure there are going to be exceptions to that rule. Yet, this Wall Street notion of success and what it takes to be this alpha that wins.
The yuppie culture.
The yuppie, I think it's a bunch of bullshit. And I don't buy into it. I think those people are doing, if they're succeeding with a hard heart and with real resentments and insecurities. And ultimately, in that mental health podcast, I talk about the 4 chair legs. I talk about, one is working hard, being proud of the job that you do. 2 is looking after your body, and that's, eating, exercising, whatever, whatever that means to you. 3 is loving and being loved, so that's friends, family. And 4 is giving back. If you've only got, let's take a Gordon Gekko, Wall Street-esque character. If the pursuit of a hard day's work and money is your only chair leg, you don't have a chair. You've got, if one or more of those legs are fundamentally not working, then your chair falls over. That's it. Yeah. So I just don't buy this idea that you can be super duper successful in one space. It's going to come back and bite you at some point unless you consider.
Well, unless you don't care about being successful in those other spaces. Which
is true and fair, but then we've seen those people, and there's enough cautionary tales. What is Scrooge if not Ebenezer Scrooge? We're coming up to Christmas. What is that if not a cautionary tale as to what happens if you shut yourself off to other areas of your life that aren't just success?
Yeah, I'm there, mate.
So that's it. We are done with all of this series guests, and we are now done. We are wrapping up, coming to the end of the bonus episodes as well, the Q&As and the behind the scenes. And I just feel incredibly proud of what we've done.
I think it's a fantastic lineup of guests for season 1. No pressure for season 2.
I think, mate, you know me, it is all about biggering and keeping moving and keeping things positive and bringing in great people. I think I am incredibly excited for what comes next, but I definitely need a break.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. And let's just be clear, Rich is a massive fan of Dr. Seuss.
I am.
And I think that's the first reference that you've thrown in. So, bit biggering from the Lorax. So I'm glad that you finally got it.
Anyway, we have some questions. Let's wrap up with some questions and leave you all to your Christmases.
So we've gone through all the different conversations. Everyone's got an amazing story, but a different story.
Yeah.
Some people are well known, some people not so well known. So, of the guests you've spoken to this season, which guest most surprised you and why?
Okay. I mean, maybe Susie?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's recency bias.
Quite possibly.
But I was thinking Calder then. She was the first person that came to mind because it's an incredible CV of achievements. Yet, for me, again, I've been around a lot of those people that have created, that have achieved those incredible things. But for her, it seems like A, her journey isn't ended anywhere near, and B, she's not motivated by achievement in the same way that lots of people are. It's about, what does that achievement then do? Is it a springboard for supporting and helping other people? No doubt why she's an MBE. I think Susie surprised me because, in fact, just in it, this will feel like a bit of another recap on the interview, and I don't mean it to be, but I went into that interview not knowing what to expect. I'd listened to her, I'd read about her, all of those things. So I went in knowing the direction I'd want it to go in. But I went into it thinking, if this is just a chat about running, I've got 10 minutes in me, much like I have when I run. I've got very, very limited running chat. So then when I opened with, tell me about where you were born. And she said, funny story, I was born on the grounds of a mental asylum.
And I weren't expecting that, were you?
I think I narrowed my eyes, DiCaprio-esque, narrowed my eyes. And I went, right, this is going to be a great interview. I knew it from the moment she said that. I thought, this has completely changed the dynamic of what I thought this might end up being. But what I don't want is for it to just be a run chat. She's done plenty of those. So she surprised me, and it just wasn't that at all. She'd had this really wide and varied life and incredible experiences. I mean, even touching on, she is
getting trapped on the Great Wall of China.
She spoke about racism in China. So I was interested. She was born in the 70s. I was thinking, half Chinese, interested. How did that play out?
Well, you asked the question.
Your parents is mixed, as a mixed relationship, and I know that didn't work out for them in terms of the relationship, but they, how was that? And she said, it's fine, where we were. It was really, really multicultural,
diverse, yeah.
really diverse. So then when she spoke about racism in China and getting spat at, getting her hair pulled, getting hit.
By a police officer.
And I'm there thinking, this is just not how I thought this interview was going to go. So again, forgive me for any recency bias, but is there a guest that surprised me? Susie. Really did.
It was just shocking, wasn't it? You don't expect to hear that. So okay, so we've touched on the next question a little bit. So there's questions around editing, and we've touched a little bit around how taking things out because it didn't quite fit. But obviously we've heard all these amazing stories and we talked about Cowder, where we got almost 2 hours in before we talked about the sort of, the flagship thing that she'd done. Is there anything any interesting stories that you knew about but then didn't have time to ask about, or any stories that came out during the interview but then had to be edited out just for the sake of making it a listenable podcast? Not everyone can do a Joe Rogan 4-hour interview. So was there anything that you heard that was really interesting or weren't able to explore in full depth?
See, I don't mind about length. I think if it's an interesting person, you pick it up, you put it down, you pick it up, you put it down. That's okay. I think it's not like a film. You don't have to watch it. And I know some people watch films in weird ways, but I prefer to watch a film beginning to end. You experience the whole thing as it is. I think with podcasts, it's not necessarily something that has to be consumed in that way. So it's never been about editing out for length, but we definitely edited things out that either took the direction of conversation in a way that steered too far away from maybe where we had been and where I was hoping to go. We've taken things out and I think this is a duty of care to the guest, that maybe they didn't mean in the moment with a microphone in their face, or they said something in the moment and they think, actually, can we not talk about that? And it might be something quite personal to them, to their family, or a social issue. There are lots of hot button, controversial topics that people aren't especially forgiving of people trying to understand and articulate. 2023. I think we've been quite supportive of these guests. They come to us, they give me and us a lot of themselves. I think it's important that we consider them and how it plays out post fact. So even Levi talking about the arrest and being framed, that was a decision to keep that in, and I'm glad that we did. It speaks to him and how he feels about the situation. The truth of the matter, that's between him and the courts and all of those things. It's not for, again, I know I said this at the time, but it's not for me to judge. It's like, does that add to the general sense of who we believe and who I believe Levi to be? Well, yes, it does. So I think it worked really, really well. I don't think there was anything that we edited out. It should have stayed in. I think we've got quite a meticulous editing process. I go through first for a content edit, listen to it. Sometimes, I play myself on, 1.5 speed. I'll go through on that first edit, then Eddie will go through and edit for both content and quality, and then we listen again. So it goes through 3 edits. I think people don't realise that this, it's not just spaffed out. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does. And it kind of leads on to a secondary question that I don't think you would have experienced yet, but as you go on, you will. So it'd be interesting at this stage of the podcast to how you might approach it. So I've heard, and this is more mainstream media interviews, where there's certain areas that guests do not want to be discussed. And they can be quite serious, interesting topics, but for whatever reason, it's like, right, do not talk to me about this. If and when you come across somebody like that, do you think having those kind of restrictions will negatively impact the conversation, or could negatively impact the conversation?
I do. So that does come a certain kind of, oh, no, sorry, you can't speak about that. This is my train set. Go play with your own, which I appreciate isn't going to be loved by everybody. And I might change my tune the second that I get insert person here that says, can we just please not talk about that divorce? But again, there's a kindness in and an appreciation for Marnie. That it was quite clear she didn't want to talk about her dad and his passing away when she was 8. So it's like, well, that's been covered by other media. I can allude to it in other areas, like this. If you want to find out about that, go Google it.
Yeah.
But in the room, that would fundamentally change the conversation. So, I don't feel like it's authoritative to say, can we please not talk about that very painful thing? If I was talking to somebody and there was some, a really high profile divorce or a really high profile court case or something, I'd be like an idiot not to appreciate them in that moment and see the humanity of the situation and think, well, Christ, there's so much more to talk about here. If I got a long list of this laundry list of things I couldn't talk about, then I might reconsider speaking to that person. I think it's going to be on a case-by-case basis, and it will happen. I know it will, where somebody says, oh, yeah, I don't want to talk about that thing. Can I still get a great conversation out of that person, with or without that thing?
Well, so these are the wrapping up questions now.
Yes.
So obviously we are coming to the end. So you've alluded to a series 2. When can we expect series 2?
I like that you say we,
I'm a listener.
Yeah, I know you are. I know. I mean, I'm very grateful.
Yeah, I'm a listener. So when can we expect season 2?
So
I'm awful at keeping track of podcasts, right? So I've followed you. So now my understanding is that by following, that when you do launch
So if you follow or subscribe on Apple, Spotify, insert thing here, then the second that an episode comes out, it'll be downloaded and you'll receive that. So to answer the question, the new series, I'm thinking we are going to be recording in the next few months, next couple of months. We're going to be doing video. I think it's probably going to be February time earliest. Get Christmas out of the way. And that's with the guests as well. It's going to close down right now. People are going to stop accepting, interviews and all that stuff. So, Christmas will be a dead time for interviews. So then I want to get a load in the bank, just like I did with this one. It helps hugely. It helps from an editing perspective. It helps from a continuity and the sheer number of messages, as I've said before, they have to go back and forth perspective. Yeah, I think February's a good bet. I need a break as well. I do this beside work and everything else. One thing that it has done is I'm not training as much as I was. So I don't feel like I'm in as good shape as I was.
Oh, now it comes out. He needs the break.
Right?
He's going to video.
This is it.
So he needs the 3 months to get back.
Listen, he thinks he's got me there. He thinks this is some sort of gotcha. I was going to say the exact same thing. I was going to say, listen, I've been in decent shape, or half decent shape at least, and right now I don't feel like I am. So just bear with me, man.
If I'm lucky enough to be invited back next season, I'm going to have to speak to Blind Boy or something and understand how to create a mask if there's no video.
For anybody that doesn't get that reference, Blind Boy
wears a plastic bag on his head.
He wears a plastic bag on his head and he uses masking tape to kind of seal it. And it's all about maintaining anonymity. So Stokes is talking there about keeping himself anonymous. Mm-hmm.
So we are now officially at the end. So do you want to take the opportunity to give any final reflections on the first season? before
Yes.
we say goodbye?
I do. There have been so many people that have helped to make this happen that I think that is the most important thing to do, is to say thank you. I end every episode with thanking the listener. I thank the guest, but the people that have helped to make this happen. If I look back, and I spoke in the last one about Dave Vitti, about Comedy Dave, Nina Sowetz, who put me on to Comedy Dave. I've thanked them. I tweeted earlier on to thank them. That's Fred Calazzo at the Rugby Pod. I want to thank Fred for taking my call, speaking to me, supporting me. He gave me some really, really good advice in relation to the types of interviews, how to speak to people, how to find people, all of that stuff. So thank you to Fred. Listen to the Rugby Pod forever. I think it's fantastic. And yeah, just really, really grateful for that. I want to thank Johnny Mouncer as well. He weirdly went to our school. In fact, Johnny was a few years below us at Crypt. And now he's head of creators at Spotify. So, I've spoken to him, and so he's been really, really gracious with his time and supportive. Stu Whiffen, I mentioned Stu a few times throughout these last few things, kind of a newer friend, but somebody nonetheless that's been super supportive since we've spoken, and brought me onto a few of his podcasts. And so I say the success of this or the kind of jump in listeners, it's coincided with me guesting on other podcasts as well. I'm hugely appreciative of Stu's help, and Chris Glasson, then his friend and co-host on Hardcore Listing. So that's the Distraction Pieces network. So they've been really supportive. And then on a more day-to-day, week-to-week level, thanks to producer Eddie. He's been in the trenches with me, and nobody deserves to have to listen to my voice as much as that man's had to. So thank you to Eddie. Thank you to Rami and his team for the social media promos. They've been absolutely fantastic. Thank you to my partner, Vic. She is the person that created the jingle that I can now not separate the podcast from. I couldn't imagine it without it. Thanks to the man, the beautiful man sat opposite me, Mr. Stokes. He's turned around. What a knobhead. Mr. Ashley Stokes, for his support. Thank you to my friends who've all been really, really kind. Everybody that's messaged or listened or stopped me in the street and said something kind. Thank you to the random people that I didn't know but now do, that have messaged and kind of come along on this with us. And I think, at the risk of upsetting anybody, I think that's a fairly concise list of people that I should be thanking. It doesn't happen in a silo. There's the Schwarzenegger video where he says, call me anything you want, but don't call me a self-made man, because it's all these people behind me that have made this happen. And I think the second that you decide to do something, the second you create, an idea, and more than create an idea, then you kind of birth that idea into the world and realize the people that you need around you to support the development of that thing. It becomes its own thing, and then it kind of creates with it its own community of people. So I'm so incredibly appreciative of any and all support, and just hope that you stick with me for Series 2 as and when we get to it.
What an awesome way to end it.
I think so. Cheers, man.
By the way.